Pulse is a 2006 film, which is a remake of a Japanese film of the same name, which was released in 2001. And this came out in the midst of the remake craze. I was going to say remix, I don't even know why. Remake craze of like the 2000s when they began with The Ring and The Grudge and all these films that started remaking these classic Japanese horror films, kind of right after they would come out, or at least within 5 years of the originals coming out. The originals always being better, obviously. Now, I have seen the original, not before this one. This one I watched for the first time, I would say less than a year ago, and then I looked up the original Japanese version and watched that one afterwards. Most of these remakes I did watch before the originals. I know I sound like a noob for saying that, and for that being the case, but yeah, a lot of the remakes that they made of the Japanese original films, I watched the remakes first. So it is what it is. I was a teen when I watched them mostly, and then some of them I didn't even know were remakes, but regardless, this states that it's the scariest movie of the year. It's certainly not the scariest movie of 2006. I'll disclaimer on that one for sure. But it does star Kristen Bell. And Kristen Bell is a very charming actress, and she always puts her all into anything she gets herself into. And she's extremely gorgeous, so you can't really go wrong with Kristen Bell. She's also in a show that I forget the name of, but it's with Don Cheadle, and it stars Don Cheadle and Kristen Bell. And I know I've watched at least the first two seasons of the show. Regardless, Kristen Bell starring in Pulse. So Pulse is a 2006 pure like 2000s film, beginning of the 21st century when you had in like 10 to 20 years, these films are going to be looked at like, classic 80s tropes and classic 90s tropes. The 2000s tropes are going to be relevant for sure. You got your color schemes, which are very bluish greenish. If anybody's seen the remake of The Ring, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's very um, dull and bluish gray and very rainy, depressing kind of color palettes going on. This film is soaked in that kind of atmosphere, and it works. It works for sure. Um, Kristen Bell's obviously gorgeous, but you've got every male character in this film either being one, a goofball, or two, a male model. And it's like they weren't able to cast anything else besides those two stereotypes and tropes. You're either a goofball and a comic relief, or you literally look like you're out of Calvin Klein in every film between 2000 and 2010. It's crazy. And a lot of these actors I don't even I I don't even recognize, or I don't recognize by name, or I don't recognize by association with any other film really. Like there's so many that I can list. Like The Fog was like this. Um, Even House of Wax, which I love, which has uh, Chad Michael Murray is his name. I'm blanking, but regardless, like they would always hire these stereotypical actors to play these roles, and a lot of them just disappeared. Outside of Chad Michael Murray, I'm pretty sure that's his name in House of Wax. But a lot of them disappeared, and it seems that a lot of actually the female actresses um, stuck around a lot more than the male ones, because the male ones were like, I'm gonna say your Edward Cullen lookalikes, but obviously Robert Pattinson made a huge name for himself, and good for him. But a lot of the actors in that time period kind of were there and then disappeared forever, and then you never hear of them again. Is kind of the point that I'm making. Um, but this is definitely a gem for its time. Obviously the original's better. Like there's no argument to be made. I've only seen it once, and I really really liked it. And this is the second time that I've seen this remake, and it's fine. I mean, it serves it serves what it's out to do. It's not scary. I mean, the jump scares are pretty cheap. The effects are fine. They work for a horror. They work for a PG-13 horror film, I guess, and it's entertaining enough. So there's not too many complaints to be made about it, other than the fact that it's ripping off or remaking an original classic that some people can argue shouldn't even be touched. The original one, for anybody, the original Japanese film from 2001, for anybody who has seen One Missed Call, the original being directed by Takashi Miike, I find those two films very similar. The original One Missed Call and the original Pulse, the original Japanese Pulse. Those films are very stylistically similar, in my opinion. From seeing them both, I would say they're stylistically very similar. So you can get an idea, if you've seen One Missed Call, what the original Pulse is like. And this one is basically just in the exact style of The Ring, just instead of you having this ghost little girl coming out of a well, you have this computer virus, ghost plague virus infection going on throughout the whatever place in America they're in, kind of thing. When it comes to settings and stuff like that, it's kind of just, it seems like it could be California, it could be New England, it could be anywhere. Realistically, it could be anywhere. But regardless, getting into the plot of the film, it starts off with this guy. He's introduced as Josh a little bit after the opening scene, but you have this guy going into this library, and he's very paranoid looking. Everything is very dark, everything is very flashy, and you can tell that there's some kind of presence that's after him, kind of thing. And it ends up attacking him in this library, and you get your first glimpse of this ghostly monster that kind of it seems like this monster or ghost is sucking the soul out of this guy in this random library while all these lights are flashing. And it's very 2000s tropes in the sense that the scenes are very quick, and it's the franchise Saw did this a lot, where it would show a scene and then it would like almost fast forward a bit, and or show a glimpse of something that happened before or happened in the past, and like go in like fast forward mode and then rewind and then show the main character again and then do it again, and just go back and forth between those rewinds and fast forwards and fast motions, and something like coming at the screen and then going back to normal. They do this a lot in this whole film, but they did that a lot in the opening act, or in the opening scene. So you have this ghostly thing seemingly sucking the soul out of this guy, and then you flash forward to this party bar scene with this kind of punkish punk rock song playing again. 2000s trope. And you're introduced to the main character, Maddie, who's played by Kristen Bell. And Maddie is dating this guy named Josh, who she can't get a hold of, this guy who was attacked at the beginning of the film. And you learn that this guy is her boyfriend, and she is trying to get a hold of him, and she has been for a few days, but really can't seem to do so. I'll just put the film down as I speak. But yeah, so she's trying to get a hold of this guy. Eventually, she does visit his apartment, and she finds him. This is after the whole library incident at the beginning. And she finds him in the apartment, and he looks like he hasn't eaten, hasn't been in the sunlight for months. This guy just looks drained, like a shell of a human being. And he looks like some kind of computer hacker that's just been spending his entire last 6 months, you could guess, just in front of a computer, because everything is taped off, everything in his apartment, there's no light whatsoever. And she goes in there, and he basically just says hello, and then goes into another room, and she's kind of investigating some stuff. She opens a closet, and there's this cat that is basically starving to death, so anybody against like harm to animals might get a little bit squeamish on that part. Obviously it's a fake cat, but you know what I mean, like a lot of people don't like watching that shit. And this cat is just like basically dying. And she's like, what the hell's going on here? And then she goes to the room where her boyfriend Josh went into, and she sees him hung. Like, he literally just hung himself in the last 10-15 seconds. And it's her dealing with this death, obviously, and her friends as well. She has a group of friends that this guy named Josh was part of, and she's dealing with the grief. She's dealing with a school counselor who's basically being the guy who's telling her that this is all in her head, and she's, dealing with grief in her own way, and that none of what she's seeing is real when it comes to the visions and stuff like that. Tons of 2000s tropes like MSN, the way they chat with each other, everything is through MSN. The cell phones are so dated. There's no like, there's no like DMing. There's no Facebook involved. It's all MSN, which I remember MSN, but geez, it was so long ago. It's funny to see a film that kind of feels like a time capsule at the same time as being a horror movie of its time. It also transports you into a whole different time that at least I remember, using all kinds of technology and methods of whatever that I haven't used for so long. It's like, oh my god, I like, it totally slipped my mind that MSN even existed until I watched this film, and it reminded me. So while she's dealing with this grief, she goes back for the computer that he was using because she wants to investigate that, and then we're introduced to Octavia Spencer, who makes a little bit of not a cameo, but she shows up in this movie. She's the landlady of the apartment that Josh lived in, and apparently she sold his computer because he was late on rent for 2 months, and she sold the computer to this young gentleman. She goes to find this young gentleman, and his name is Dexter. Always good to see a guy with my name in a film, because or in anything, because the name Dexter is not very common. And yes, I do love the show. Obviously, I have the entire Dexter New Blood series review on the channel. So, but seeing a Dexter in a film, I'm just like, yes. You don't come across that name too often, but she comes across this guy who bought this computer, and they really they really form a bond pretty quick, especially with like her going through the grief. She kind of just shows up, and she's questioning him about what was on the computer, and because she was also receiving a lot of messages from Josh, knowing that Josh was already dead, so she got the impression that somebody was obviously fucking with her. And she figures it's this guy who bought the computer, and he's like, no, I literally didn't even plug it in. So he opens the trunk of his car, and there's the computer sitting there, not plugged in. He hasn't plugged it in since he bought the damn thing. And she's, it basically goes from there. It's like these hauntings are going on, and she's getting these weird messages. And then a lot of other people start having kind of similar experiences. So you get this plot going on where this computer virus kind of turned into a physical format, and these ghostly presence are coming out of the computer realm and digital, coded world into physical form, and actually draining not the souls of people, but what the film explains is the will to live. And when these ghosts kind of grab a person and suck what you think is the soul of the person, it's actually sucking their will to live. So they just become an empty shell where nothing, they don't. It's like maximizing their depression, you could say. They don't feel like eating, walking, talking, seeing anybody. Basically wanting to have nothing to do with absolutely anything whatsoever, not even having the motivation to kill themselves, because a lot of the characters who are victimized to this virus, they say that they have no motivation to even end it. Like, that's how little motivation this computer virus, or however they portray it, is draining everything out of these people. So the film plays off like that, and she's investigating what's going on with this character named Dexter, and she's delivered a package at one point from Josh somehow, which is a bunch of red tape, and apparently this red tape, when you tape, that's why the apartment of Josh was all covered in like tape and shit like that, because this red tape apparently keeps these ghostly virus demons out. And then we're introduced to this character named Douglas Ziegler, and Douglas Ziegler was a guy that we learned that Josh was chatting with, and Josh actually hacked this guy named Douglas's computer, and this is where he found this program that Douglas was working on for quite a while. In the third act, we actually meet Douglas, and Douglas is basically Neo from the Matrix times a million, when not with the like bending reality and shit like that. I'm talking about at the beginning of the Matrix, when you saw him as a computer geek, like hacking and being like his nerd self and stuff like this. By the way, there is one scene too at the beginning of the film where this guy is selling either like burnt CDs or burnt DVDs, and again, that's a super 2000s trope where this guy just takes this like booklet of CDs and he just like brings the rack out and he's like, I got these for sale and I got these for sale. He looks like some underground merchant trying to sell pirated media in public, but like you never see that these days because everything is so like everything's just digital. Everything is like files. You don't have an actual physical like book of discs. So I really found that funny to see that. But yeah, going back to the end with Douglas, he basically created this he calls it his baby or whatever, where he was hacking a bunch of codes and just passing around through whatever underground dark web shit that he was involved in, and he discovered this virus that was so advanced that like codes that people had never even heard of, codes that were so complex that like the top tier computer dark web hackers had never even imagined, let alone seen. So he had this, and then Josh hacked this and stole it, and Josh is the one who basically exposed it to the world. Now, the ending of the film, it really does turn into an apocalyptic situation real fast, and the CGI is terrible. So you have this whole CGI apocalyptic world. You have this plane crashing, which is the same as the Japanese version. I'd say both versions are kind of cheesy in their own ways. They're different. Like I said, with the Japanese version, I compare it a lot to the original One Missed Call when it comes to the style of the film. I know that Takashi Miike didn't direct Pulse, the original Pulse, the Japanese Pulse, but they still have a lot of stylistic similarities. But with this one, you have the same plane crash in the same kind of way, and you have now this apocalyptic world where this virus is spreading so fast and making people not have the will to live, but still have such a hard time ending their own lives. And it's interesting in that way. But the best thing about this film, and I'll keep saying, is just how much of a time capsule it is, and how much it feels in that vein of 2000s films. Because I know that there's gonna be a trope just like you had, like there's going to be 80s, there's going to be 90s, and I already can feel that 2000s flair that is going to be replicated in, like, I'd say 10 years, with future films going back and trying to like recreate that time with the music and with the way the films were shot, and just personalities, like personality types that you would see in 2000s films. It's just full of that. And although it's not terrifying, it's pretty cheesy a lot of times, I mean. And it's not it's not the best filmmaking in the world, but you know when you're watching, you know, when you're watching an American remake of a Japanese film. Like there was that period of time where they were just doing it so much and repeating so many things that you're just like, yeah, like I know exactly what I'm watching, and it's fantastic. So yeah, I mean, the scares are fun. They're not scary. They're just fun, and it's a fun film to enjoy if you want to experience, especially if you've watched it like 100 times when you were younger, or if you were like a teen, or if you were a kid when these kind of films came out. I was 2006. I was like 17. Yeah, I was 17 in 2006. So I never watched it back then. I watched it for the first time like a year or two ago. But it definitely transported me back there because The Ring I saw in theaters when it came out, and I was like 12 or 13, and this is like right in that kind of realm. So a lot of nostalgia, whether you've seen it or not, because like I said, it's a product of its time, and you know what to expect with it. So Pulse is fine. I gave it 2.5 out of 5 on Letterboxd. It's entertaining. Watch the original. I'll always say watch the original with subtitles. Don't ever watch Japanese horror dubbed because it's just gonna ruin the experience. But yeah, watch the original, but don't neglect this one just because it's an American remake. Because you could, they still have some charm in them that you can enjoy, for entertainment purposes, if nothing, you know what I mean. So that's what I gotta say on Pulse, and I am reviewing the Pulse 2 and 3 because actually I might I should mention that there's the Japanese Pulse that was released in 2001. Then they remade it, and then they released two sequels, Pulse 2 and Pulse 3, which I've never seen. So the sequels are exclusive to the American remake. They're sequels to this one. Now there is a Pulse from 1988, which is totally unrelated. And I thought I'd mention that too, because I did review it on this channel for 31 Days of Horror in 2020. And I watched it for the first time, and there is a review on this. So there's Pulse from 1988 that has nothing to do with the Japanese Pulse or this remake of the Japanese Pulse. It's a totally different Pulse. It's just called Pulse from 1988. So to separate that confusion, there's that Pulse, and then there's the Japanese Pulse, and then there's the remake of the Japanese Pulse. So just to clarify that a little bit. But I will be reviewing Pulse 2 and 3, watching them for the first time because I've never seen them, and looking forward to it because I have no idea what to expect with the sequels to Pulse, because this one ends pretty concrete. Like there's not, like, unless they explore more of the apocalyptic world, unless they start to explore different stories from different people before the shit went down. I have no idea, but they're from Dimension Extreme. Dimension Extreme is a pretty good it's a pretty good distribution company when it comes to B movies, especially, and direct to video films. Anything they release is usually direct to video, but they do a good job on what they pick and what they decide to put out. So their stuff is definitely pretty entertaining. So I'm I'm looking forward to it. So reviews on Pulse 2 and 3 are coming soon. So, but that was Pulse, the remake of the Japanese film released in 2006. Kristen Bell's hot. Go check it out. Subscribe to Morgan Film Fan if you like to listen to my voice, or if you like my film reviews, and check out the ones on the channel already, and I'll be back with more as soon as I can. So until then, take care, cheers, have a good one.